Good evening, everybody. The U.S. Supreme Court making history, and making history as it has never been made before in the United States, ruling that President Donald J. Trump has absolute immunity for clearly official acts of the president. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice John Roberts ruling that the president, quote, enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. That's the question. The rest of the answer begins with the president is not above the law. All of that seems straightforward and correct, unless you happen to be a hysterical Marxist Democrat who is trying to take over the country along with a Biden regime with clear abuses of power almost daily, like Joe Morrell of New York. The New York congressman said he would try to reverse the high court's decision to ensure no president is ever above the law. That seems to be one part of the answer. The rest of the answer is any president should be brought down by whomever the Marxist Dems choose. The party led by a president who is clearly trying to jail his political rival, he wants you to believe he cares deeply about democracy. Well, Morrell isn't the only Democrat who has simply lost his mind. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez threatening to bring the articles of impeachment against the U.S. Supreme Court. The truth is that Democrats are losing their minds because the ruling throws a wrench in President Trump's January 6th trial. Former Chief of Staff to the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Kash Patel, is here to take up all of that with us. He is not only a top DOD official, but a former top Department of Justice official and great American. Kash, thanks for joining us. Your reaction to the Supreme Court decision itself, if you would, and where we head now, because this is, it seems to be a determinate event in American history that will decide not only who the next president is, but whether our constitutional republic itself survives.
Well, Lou, it's great to be with you. And look, I think you have had it right this entire time because you are a man who understands how our Constitution works and how to follow the rule of law, which is the thing you and I are in violent agreement about. And so many other Americans are as well. So the Supreme Court got it right. We've said it all along. Every president has full presidential immunity. Not some of them, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, all of them, going back to our entire history and going forward through the rest of our history. And so this court ruling speaks a vindication for constitutionalists like you and myself and so many millions of other Americans. And I think the mainstream media's response, the radical left's rapid fire response to this decision just buoys its validity. They're talking about doing unconstitutional things to a constitutional court. They want to impeach the justices now for doing what? Their jobs and following the rule of law. They want to impeach the justices and take down the Trump machine because they say Donald Trump's actions were unconstitutional. And I'm just happy as a former DOJ lawyer and a guy who loves the law to see our Supreme Court finally work. And the radical left could not be more apoplectic with how the law has been applied to President Trump because they are the ones that created the fictitious legal system to take him down.
And the politics of this thing are becoming absolutely bizarre. Suddenly, we're hearing that Hunter Biden, the president's son, who is on trial and for corruption, straightforwardly, is now sitting in on White House meetings. That's as of today. Where is the security clearance? What are the standards that this administration, in this moment of obvious desperation, where are those standards, and why in the world isn't someone in the national media in this country, the corporate media, talking about these critically important issues and insisting on the highest standards of governance to be set forth by the Biden regime? It's as if they have some sort of immunity from the law itself. Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, and Jack Smith. I mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah, and I apologize. I didn't mean to laugh at you just there, but I just let in the absurdity of what you just said. There's a federal convicted felon sitting next to the commander in chief of the United States, giving him advice on everything from our national security, the border, the CCP, the Ukraine, the Russians, and so much other information. And the logbooks will show how much time Hunter Biden is spending there at his secondary home, the White House, and making it his command center. But you're right. The mainstream media is missing on this one. It's not a surprise. But if we had a convicted felon who was sitting next to Donald Trump when he was president, who happened to be his son, they would have lost their minds. And right now, America has been as rudderless as we have been. And the Biden administration and the Biden family in particular have just shown us how much regard they have for our Constitution and our law. And it is zero. All they care about is the fame, the headlines, the planes, the cars, and Dr. Jill running around the country pretending she is the next iteration of Madonna for the radical left.
It's my turn to laugh. Dr. Jill is Madonna, is thought to behold, but I'm going to move on from it. Let's turn to the question of whether the president will drop out of the race. A straightforward question. Reporters shouting that question to Joe Biden, he wouldn't respond to it. There is no regard, respect, or response even, reply even, to the president of the United States by the national mainstream media. He is held in obvious contempt if by the New York media. Really, it's insane that they would not insist upon answers to their questions, and the White House feel an obligation to respect the public's right to know in this country.
Well, this is nothing new from Joe Biden's White House. Answering questions of consequence has been something they have been completely have an aversion to their entire time. And the most consequential question for this White House after the debate disaster of Joe Biden is simply, are you going to run again, as you put it? And I don't know the answer to whether or not he's going to run again and say no. I do believe the Democratic machine has implemented a situation where they're going to take Joe Biden out. Now, whether that is at the convention of the Democratic Party in August or beforehand via threatening to utilize the 25th Amendment, I don't believe, and I haven't believed in a long time, that Joe Biden was going to be the nominee. And I think that's why he refuses to face the music and answer these tough questions, because he will just provide us with more ammunition and evidence to show that he is not fit for the job.
He's not fit for the job. How do you think it plays from here? The president, obviously, President Donald J. Trump, the 45th president of the United States, has a clear path forward to victory on November 5th of this year. But it is unclear what will happen. Will indeed President Biden, will he withdraw his nomination? Can he legally do so? Can, as a matter of political tradition in the United States, can he do so? And what do you think will be the implications and the reaction of the Marxist Dems to all that they now see before them? And that is a president who is not only corrupt, but frankly so cognitively impaired and incapable of fulfilling the demands of that very demanding job as commander-in-chief.
Well, Lou, you raised such a great legal point. Can Joe Biden even withdraw? Because he has already ascertained 90% of the delegates necessary to receive the nomination of the Democratic Party through the so-called democratic process. How undemocratic and unlawful would it be for the Marxist Dems to come in and hijack that process away from the American citizens who voted to have Joe Biden be their candidate? That is a huge issue if it's even legal. Now, the answer to that from the Marxist Democratic stance is they don't care about the rule of law. They'll write a new rule of law.
Kash, we appreciate it. Thanks so much. And it's going to be an extraordinary moment in our history these next few months. And we thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Kash Patel.
Thanks so much. Happy 4th.
In other news, Vice President Kamala Harris was caught in what was a humiliating lie by Elon Musk yesterday. after Harris, falsely claimed that President Trump would ban abortion nationwide. Musk very publicly reminded her that lying doesn't fly on Twitter or X, his platform, anymore. Last week, the U.S. Supreme Court issued another major ruling in favor of equal justice, potentially overturning sentencing decisions for many January 6 defendants. Joe McBride, CEO of the McBride Law Firm, is with us tonight to take up what this means for the prosecution of President Trump's supporters on January 6th. I want to get your reaction because in this overwhelming Supreme Court ruling, historic, the clear cut issue is on the 1512 USC order to simply put forward the idea that it is not in effect for these J6 prisoners. And I know there's still litigation to go. I know there are many questions to be answered, but this looks like a win for those January 6 defendants and prisoners of the Biden Department of Justice.
Yes, yes, truth indeed, Lou. Lou, first and foremost, thank you for having me. I appreciate all the work that you've done over the course of your life, your continued service and patriotism to this country. It stands out amongst all the debauchery and the communism, the mainstream media, even some people online. You're a pillar. I've looked up to you for a long time, and I always appreciate the opportunity to come on your show and to talk with you. And regarding the 1512 charge, this is something that we have been saying was constitutionally improper since day one. The 1512 charge has to do with document shredding, Enron litigation. Enron, they shredded documents in anticipation of litigation. That's what the 1512 was designed to protect against. It is not designed to persecute and prosecute protesters. So we were saying since day one, hey, number one, there's structural and problems with this law, the way that's written. Number two, the intention behind the legislators when they wrote this law, they could have never foreseen it being applied to January 6 protesters or any protesters for that matter, which is why it was never applied to anybody ever before January 6. So, we have been talking about it. Every judge on the DC court, with the exception of Judge Nichols, stood against us and told us that we were wrong. The DC circuit stood against all of us and certainly stood against Mr. Fisher, told him that he was wrong. But the case went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court could have sliced it and diced it a bunch of different ways. They decided to drill down on the applicability of the law and to say, hey, this applies to what we're going to call paperwork crimes. And unless a January 6er went to the Capitol with the specific purpose of disrupting or destroying documents related to the certification process and did indeed do that, if he didn't do that, then he's off the hook. If they did do that, then they're going to be on the hook. Which January 6er did that? Not a single person. So in practice, this is going to get the vast majority of the people off. The DOJ is probably going to try to shape and smooth it in their way because they just don't know how to lose. But at the end of the day, this is a massive win for January 6ers, for Mr. Fisher, and for all of us attorneys who have been saying that this has been wrong since day one.
Well, Joe, it's just an extraordinary moment in history where we're watching the illegitimate committee formed by Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi. There isn't a leg to stand on here that I can see, certainly. I'll leave it to you attorneys to litigate. But the reality is, on any basis of common sense, decency, and the American system of the rule of law, I can't see how it could possibly prevail against the constitutional rights of these hundreds of January 6 prisoners. And what a great statement by the Supreme Court to uphold the Constitution and the law against political abuse of power by the Biden regime. Your thoughts?
Well, I agree with you 100%. We're seeing the wisdom and the foresight of our founding fathers who left despotism, who left an autocratic ruler an absolute monarch in England. And when they came over here, they knew full well the evils that could take place if one person or one branch of government got too strong, which is why they set up a system of checks and balances. And we're seeing here, and as we have also seen historically, the Supreme Court rebuke and slap down the presidency, and the Supreme Court rebuke and slap down Congress. We saw it with the overturning of Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown v. Board of Education, with all the civil rights litigation. We've seen it at other times, other pivotal times throughout the course of this powerful and wonderful country. And we're seeing it again now. We're seeing that the Supreme Court is the last and greatest hope of making sure that an executive who vertically integrates his power and politicizes the criminal justice system, and then works in concert to prosecute political dissidents and the reigning defending champion who's going to be the next, potentially the next president of this country, Donald J. Trump, right? They've been persecuting the little man. They've been persecuting the big guy. Supreme Court says, you know what? You've got to wait for this long. You can't do it anymore. We rebuke you. We shut you down in the name of freedom, in the name of fairness, in the name of democracy, and with the power of the Constitution. So it's a great and wonderful and powerful thing. And a lot of us are sleeping a lot better at night knowing that this happened.
Especially those prisoners of this totalitarian regime. An extraordinary moment in a storm of history in America. And thank God for that storm in this court, as you said. I want to turn to your organization, how people watching you and listening to you right now can support the defense of these January 6 political prisoners of the Marxist left. Where can they send their donations to? Where can they find out more about what you and other attorneys are doing for the other defendants of January 6?
I appreciate that, Lou. So for those of you who are able to contribute financially, you can go to McBrideLawNYC.com. That is McBrideLawNYC.com. Just look for the January 6th tab. There'll be instructions on how to give there. All of my clients have needed help. We have crowd funded and crowd raised almost 100% of everything that we have done, that we're going to continue to do for these great people. It's very important. Your help is really appreciated. Those of you who can't help financially, please help us with your prayers. And for information, the best place to go is to my social media, which you can find on X, or formerly Twitter, or Instagram. I am McBride Law NYC across all social media platforms. Give me a follow there, and that's where you'll be able to find the latest, greatest, most breaking news with regard to the stuff that we're doing globally and specific to my clients.
Joe, we appreciate you being with us. Joe McBride, great American. Thanks for all that you've done and all that you are doing now with the power of the Supreme Court at your back. We look to you getting a lot done for this nation, a lot done for these great Americans who are confined in the D.C. gulag, as we've come to call it over the years. Thanks so much, Joe. House Republicans now are suing Attorney General Merrick Garland for the audio recordings of Joe Biden's interview with Special Counsel Robert Hur in his classified documents case against President Biden. Garland personally blocked the release of those audio tapes to Congress by asserting executive privilege. Well, now his position has been bolstered by Republicans who are hitting back hard to show that they mean business in recovering those audio tapes. The tide in this country, the political tide, is obviously turning. And that is thanks in no small part to the U.S. Supreme Court, which just handed President Donald Trump a huge win on presidential immunity. Mark McClosky, conservative attorney, understands better than most people the importance of a fair and impartial system of justice. Attorney, the host of Mark McClosky on Fire. Let's bring him on now. Mark, great to have you here. Let's start with your thoughts about the ruling itself, that official acts of the president are absolutely immune through executive privilege.
Well, it was a decision that we anticipated. The position of the government going up to the Supreme Court was that the president had no immunity for anything. And obviously, the president has to be immune for his official acts because he has to make, assuming we have a president that has a mind, a split-second decision that could affect the fate of the world. I mean, literally the fate of the world. In these days of hypersonic missiles, you can reach the United States from virtually anywhere in minutes. And a president has to make decisions without worrying about, am I going to get sued down the road? Well, that was dealt with earlier. Am I going to get criminally prosecuted down the road? And that's what the Supreme Court ruled on Monday this week. The president has absolute immunity for his core presidential responsibilities as spelled out in the Constitution, and a presumption of immunity for all official acts. And the corollary was no immunity for non-official acts, and basically said to the trial court, you go figure out what's an official act and what isn't, and then we'll talk about
it. And that answer seems to be straightforward. The line even that not all of the president's time is spent as president, but the reality is straightforward. This man, as we are watching him right now, Joe Biden in this office, is unfit for the presidency because of the demands upon him intellectually, physically, mentally, in every way. And to think that there would be this display, whether it be the prosecutions and persecutions by the Marxist Dems in local jurisdictions, state and federal, county, in this country, seems to be ready-made to prove President Donald J. Trump's case that he must have political immunity and legal liability from these characters on the part of the Marxist left who are leading the Democratic Party these days.
Well, up until last Thursday, when the president displayed for the entire world the fact that he's incompetent and actually a threat to our security, a threat to the world, it was still a close race. But you got to then take into account that Judge Juan Machon had held Donald Trump prisoner in his courtroom for 6 weeks, held him prisoner for 6 weeks, and then put a gag order on him so he was not actually held in his courthouse on these totally bogus charges. He was not allowed to defend himself or speak about the case, which is totally unprecedented for the defendant as opposed to defense counsel, right, to be barred from talking about the case. But sure, as you say, Lou, the very proof of how the president needs to have this privilege, this immunity from prosecution, is demonstrated by the fact that, right, he's being sued every place for unprecedented alleged charges, and basically this is election interference at the highest degree, more so than we've ever seen in our lives. You got to go all the way back to the Watergate era to see a prosecution of a president, and even then, not criminally prosecuted, but the pursuit of a president through the media for what the media doesn't like. My favorite part of the Supreme Court opinion in Trump versus United States was where the Supreme Court said motive can't be considered, because all the left wants to do is attack Donald Trump's motives, that he's a bad guy, that he wants to take over the country. My favorite, though, is he's 10 years older than me, so he's 78 years old, that he's going to be president forever. And that our fear is if we reelect him, he will never relinquish power and Donald Trump will be president forever. Well, he must have pretty good longevity if that's going to take place.
Absolutely. Mark, I want to just turn to the issue of Juan Merchat, the judge in New York. This is just incredible. The so-called hush money case delayed because of the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity, for him to suggest, as did the prosecutors in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, that they don't oppose delaying it for that reason. It turns out Merchant says that they do want to hold that just in case it's necessary, based on the findings. We're living through remarkable times, and I just want to bring in a number of people here today to take up the issue of this one question, and that question is this: does the United States still have a legal system that is impartial, that is capable of being restored to fairness and objectivity, and will it ever get away from advocacy rather than than trying to balance the rights, the constitutional rights of American citizens. Will it ever happen now?
Well, I think if Trump gets reelected, I think if he does a wholesale clearing of the Department of Justice, the FBI, all the U.S. attorneys, all the assistant U.S. attorneys, and restores the basic tenets of our constitutional republic, the separation of powers. In light of the Supreme Court's decision yesterday granting the president absolute immunity for official acts and a presumption of immunity for all other official acts, I think that the bar has now been raised where it'd be very difficult for prosecution of a president in the future to take place. But that's just on the federal level. Then you've got all these state district attorneys, you got state attorney generals and local district attorneys that are exercising their power in jurisdictions where 95% of the population votes Democrat, where the juries are going to convict you no matter what. I have my own concerns here in St. Louis, where if we'd gone to trial in St. Louis on the bogus charges that the Soros-funded DA had placed on us, we'd have been convicted no matter what. Because it's not a matter of factually what you did or did not do wrong. It's a matter of what your political opinions are and whether or not they overlap with the political opinions of your local government. And if you're a conservative in a liberal Democrat environment and they want to burn you, they can still burn you. And it's not just the president of the United States. Look at all the other people. Steve Bannon right now is in jail up in Connecticut. Peter Navarro is in jail for doing exactly what Merrick Garland did, which is refuse a congressional subpoena. Is Merrick Garland in prison? Is he gonna refer himself for criminal prosecution? And then, of course, Mike Johnson has the power under the rules of Congress and under law to have him arrested by the sergeant at arms. But is that going to happen? So until we have a wholesale clearing of all the people in government now that believe that they can exercise their power for political reasons, exercise their control over who does and does not get elected outside of the ballot box, until we have that clearinghouse, I think we're in very, very difficult times. And, you know, I say this every day to clients that call in. I say, this was 5 years ago. I could accurately predict the outcome of your issue. Now I have to say, you don't know. There's no longer any basis in the law that I could point my finger at and say, this is definitely the way it's going to happen, because they just make it up as they go along.
Yeah, unfortunately, and criminally, in my opinion. Mark, it's always great to have you with us. Thanks very much for joining us in these historic days. Look forward to talking with you again soon. God bless you.
God bless you, and thanks for having me on again.
We're turning now to a moment of departure, if you will, from the subject at hand, and that is returning this country to a constitutional republic. I want to turn for just a moment to a deal that you don't want to miss. All of you know that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box offices or shopping channels the way they once did. They've been part of the cancel culture. So they want to pass the savings directly on to you, and they're continuing their $25 extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a problem solution, one product company. Well, since then, with the help of his outstanding employees, they now have hundreds of products. Some of you may not know about that as we are going through a huge list now. To get the word out, they're having a $25 extravaganza. Beach towels, $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. Their 6-pack towels, well, those sets are now $25. You guessed it. And 4-pack dish towels, also $25. Now, for a limited time, you will also receive Mike's Movies free with any purchase. You'll see these amazing offers at mypillow.com/Dobbs or call 800-977-9152 and use promo code Dobbs. And please join us for my podcast, The Great America Show, each and every day. And there's a chance that Donald Trump's sentencing in the so-called hush money case could be delayed because of the U.S. Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity. Prosecutors in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office said they don't oppose delaying it for that reason. Now, we're living in remarkable times, I think we all have to admit. And with us now to take all of this up, to discuss these extraordinary, historic times, is conservative attorney Kurt Olson. And Kurt, at this moment in history, to see that ruling handed down by the Supreme Court, establishing immunity in law, give us your thoughts about how important that is, particularly given the state of our society right now and the political abuse of power by the Marxist Dems in this country that is unrelenting and particularly targeting President Donald J. Trump.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Lou. This ruling is clearly a victory for the president because it throws a major roadblock and actually it stops any notion of a trial before the election that Jack Smith or any other prosecutor could bring. So in the short run, and specifically with respect to the president, President Trump, I think it's a huge victory, obviously. I think in the long run, there are some, I think, troubling aspects to this decision because it leaves open the threat of prosecution even for official acts, kind of like the sword of Damocles hanging over the president's head for either, deep state administrative officials. Presidents come and go every 4 years, but the functionaries in the Department of Justice, they can last for decades, or the opposition party to go after a former president for something they don't like. And it because the framing of immunity that the Supreme Court basically articulated here, it leaves that door open for abuse. And we've already seen lawfare employed against President Trump. And I don't have any illusions that lawfare could be employed in future administrations by opposition parties of the Marxist left.
Well, that's troubling, your analysis, because one of the things that one sees as we look across this canvas of American society 2024 is, as you say, absolute lawfare, abuse of our legal system brought to bear against the Republican Party, the Republican nominee, and the former Republican president, Donald J. Trump. There is no way in the world that a rational person could suggest, it seems to me, that there could be any equivocation about that immunity for a president conducting official business of the government of the United States. But you make it sound as though we're going to see lawfare writ large across American politics rather than diminished.
Well, I think that the deep state and the Biden administration crossed the Rubicon in going after President Trump for what can only be termed lawfare. I mean, the allegations are baseless. It's clearly harassment. It's never been done before in the history of our country, yet here we are. And so what this ruling did is it carved out absolute immunity for the president with respect to the exercise of powers that are exclusively within his constitutional authority. In this case, President Trump's conduct and conversations with the acting attorney general that had been the subject of special counsel Smith's prosecution. Those were absolutely immune. There can be no criminal liability associated with those activities or conduct. However, the Supreme Court carved out a niche under the separation of powers meaning powers that are shared with either Congress or other state legislative officials or the civilian population in general in the terms of free speech. But wherever there is official conduct that is not exclusively within the purview of the president under the Constitution, the court created a rebuttable presumption, which to me is just an invitation for scrutiny of every official act to see if there is some sort of shared authority, and then can it be challenged and criminally. And now the Supreme Court did say that the president's motives cannot be taken into consideration in any type of analysis. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of official acts that are taken, during the course of a presidency. And every one of those acts that involves a power or authority shared with Congress or somebody else is now subject to criminal scrutiny by a rogue prosecutor or a rogue administration.
Do I understand you correctly to be suggesting that and saying that in some ways the power of the presidency is subordinated to the bureaucracy itself, whether they be a regulatory agency with some judicial authority, or whether it be a what would we call it, a committee put together by a opposing a political party in the Congress or the Senate, and suggesting that they have power to determine what the president's thought crimes were. That's what it sounds like.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And it is like the sword of Damocles. And so, I mean, this issue was addressed in Nixon v. Fitzgerald, a Supreme Court decision back in 1974, which dealt with civil liability, where they said that there is absolute immunity from damages in the context of civil litigation. And that decision was very, well thought out. And even though there is no immunity expressly in the Constitution, they noted the impact on the presidency and on the nation at large by a president who is constantly looking over their shoulder, that would have a deleterious effect. And so in the context of civil liability, there is an absolute bar. And I don't think that the rationale there is any different, if not even more applicable, in the criminal context.
Well, that is both troubling, thought-provoking, and deeply concerning, because the Supreme Court obviously, well, I would say obviously, am I not correct? Obviously left open that rather gaping hole in their reasoning for immunity.
Yes, I mean, they left it for courts and prosecutors to wrestle with whether a particular act, an official act, that was illegal, criminally. Now they put in guardrails, but we've seen how the law is abused. And so in a law school context, in a perfect world where power was not abused, this would be perfectly framed. But we know that power is abused, and it has been abused with the president. And it's, like I said, they've crossed the Rubicon. So this decision, I look at it through a lens of how can this decision and the framework be abused? And it allows for abuse.
And that abuse is legal. Its power is political. So what are the two parties, major parties, to do? The Marxist Dems are looking at preserving power through what it, with your analysis, preserving power through continuing abuse of the legal system, lawfare, and the power of just simply government operating as it has for the past, 4.5 years. Give us, if you will, your concluding thoughts on where the two parties politically, where is this country headed?
Well, I think we have seen what the Democrats and the left, which I think is coextensive with the establishment, have been willing to do. The lawfare that has been waged against candidate for President Trump, beginning in 2016, with what we know was illegal spying on his campaign. And there has been a court finding, an admission, that the FISA warrant was illegally obtained, yet there were little, if any, consequence to that. But all of the lawfare that has been waged against President Trump, whether it be in New York State Court, in Georgia State Court, through the federal system with Special Counsel Smith, all of these charges illustrate the abuse of power to target a political opponent, not only for the detriment of that candidate and President Trump, but also to the detriment of the country. And what I am concerned about is that you can see in the establishment, where are the voices coming out against this abuse of power in the establishment power circle? So you see the right, MAGA and, certain voices saying this is wrong. And now, I mean, the Missouri Attorney General, and, he deserves to be praised. He came out and filed suit in New York saying that this is election interference, pure and simple, which is what it is. But there needs to be more people with courage like the Missouri Attorney General.
Right. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey. Kurt, we appreciate as always your insight, your thoughts, and your salient wisdom in all of this, and it extends not only from the legal but to the political, which seems to be the foundations of so much of our agony that has been set upon the American people through lawfare and the Marxist-Dem totalitarianism that we have to contend with now. Kurt, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it as always. God bless you.
Pleasure, Lou. Thank you.
Turning to other stories making headlines this evening, a federal judge has blocked a law that would enable Oklahoma officials to order illegal aliens out of the state. The judge arguing that the federal government, not the states, has authority over immigration. The problem, however, is that the federal government has little interest in enforcing that immigration authority. Calls for Joe Biden to withdraw from the presidential race have accelerated and intensified after his disastrous debate performance. One person in particular has vehemently encouraged Joe Biden to ignore those calls, none other than his son, Hunter Biden. The New York Times reporting that Hunter has strongly encouraged his father to stay in the race against President Trump. Maybe he has some interest in a pardon. Who knows? In other news, the Iowa Supreme Court has ruled in favor of a 6-week abortion ban once a heartbeat is detected. 6 weeks. The ban makes exceptions for rape, incest, and threats to the mother's life. And here now is common sense legislation that honors the sanctity of life, and naturally, Joe Biden just hates it. But that's true for just about everything they look at. If it helps Democrats, it's obviously good. If it hurts Democrats, it's terrible. They're totally incapable of impartiality. You're seeing this right now in everything from state-level abortion rulings to presidential immunity. Former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Joe diGenova, joins us here today. Happy 4th of July, happy holidays, and happy constitutional republic. The Supreme Court looks like they have made an important decision here that will preserve rather than offend this great nation.
Lawfare in reverse. And it's a wonderful thing to see. You can't get more lawfarish than SCOTUS. And boy, did they lower the boom yesterday. And I must say, stunning ruling really throws a wrench into all of the prosecutions, state and federal, of President Trump, and creates an incredible evidentiary problem for all the prosecutors. I have to tell you, Lou, one of the things that President Trump can be grateful for in this process is the trial having gone forward in New York, because that legal disgrace caught the attention of the Supreme Court. They watched it. They saw what happened. They were appalled by it. And it definitely influenced yesterday's ruling on immunity, because that case explained to the court in no uncertain terms that they needed to do precisely what they did yesterday. And it was a stunning, stunning case. And I've heard some commentators say it doesn't mean very much. The state cases are fine. Nonsense. When the court went as far as it did, when it said that evidentiary rulings can be affected, the evidence that was used that may be covered by absolute privileges and presumptive presidential immunity, that goes into every case against President Trump, which means there have to be hearings in every case to determine the applicability. And what's really fascinating is Judge Merchan immediately granted the request to delay the sentencing, and he set it for September the 18th, a long time away, to give himself time to curry favor with the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah, I just wonder how in the world does a totalitarian, authoritarianist federal judge, state judge, curry favor with the highest court of the federal judiciary system?
The answer is he sees he's in trouble. The entire New York state system is in trouble. When he imposes the sentence on Trump, and if you'll notice, he said, a sentence is scheduled for September the 18th, if necessary, after all the proceedings. I think what he has decided is he's in big trouble. He doesn't want that case reviewed by the Supreme Court. He doesn't want the rebuke against him and the appellate courts of New York that is in store for them if they actually do something crazy. If he's very smart, he will find evidentiary flaws in the government's case and dismiss it right now. Because if he tries to dig in and he imposes a sentence, no matter what it is, Donald Trump is going to go immediately to United States District Court, file a writ of habeas corpus, and to have the entire thing thrown out.
That is stunning, and it sounds like a very, very good legal strategy on the part of the New York system, which I've always, well, not always, but in the last, I would say at least 5 years, have said is the most corrupt judicial system in the country, except for that in Washington, D.C. And I think we've seen that here. I mean, I wish that it were untrue. But the reality is that this country right now is in all of the pain that you are saying right now the Supreme Court is witnessing. It is a perfect evidence to support this decision. This country right now is in deep and painful trouble.
I couldn't agree more, Lou. And one of the things that fascinated me by the way that decision was written yesterday, it's a beautifully written decision by Chief Justice Roberts. It's done in simple terms, but very powerful and very dismissive in a very polite way, more polite than the lower courts in the District of Columbia deserve. Both Judge Chutkan and the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals were absolutely crushed by Chief Justice Roberts. He said they moved too quickly. They didn't give it enough thought. These are complex questions. So guess what, boys and girls? Actually, it's all girls because every judge involved in the case was a woman. We're sending this back to you for further proceedings consistent with this opinion, and take your time. Get it right, because if it comes back up here, it isn't going to be pretty. You'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind if you're Judge Chutkan to think that you can move swiftly in this case like a bunch of lawfare guys like Andrew Weissman and others are advising Judge Chutkan. She should hold these hearings quickly and get through this. Judge Chutkan better worry about what the Supreme Court is going to say about her the next time they get this case, if it isn't thrown out.
It's brilliant analysis as usual by Joe diGenova, and here we are. We're on. It seems the tenterhooks of history with almost every passing day when it comes to rolling back the authoritarian stream of the U.S. federal judiciary. Joe, as always, I'm going to give you the last word. Thank you for joining us, and God bless you on this critically important moment in our history. And you get the last word.
I'm just so proud of the Supreme Court. I'm happy that Donald Trump was able to put 3 fantastic justices on the Supreme Court. When the structural issues of the Constitution were involved, they came through. This is a great moment for the rule of law. And isn't it fun to watch the Dems who scream about the rule of law say, we don't like this, let's pack the court. That's what they're all about, changing the rules, never obeying the rules.
And with that, Joe diGenova, thanks for being with us, my friend. God bless you, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
The Marxist Dems aren't taking news of the Supreme Court's immunity ruling very well, to say the least. In fact, Zoe Lofgren, a California Democrat, suggested that this ruling could empower Biden to assassinate the conservative justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. Yes, that actually happened. Watch this.
History. I guess, theoretically, President Biden, acting within the scope of his official duties, could dispatch the military to take out the conservative justices on the court, and he'd be immune.
Is that incredible? It's a hypothetical. It's a fantasy. We understand that. But it is a shocking manifestation of what the Marxist Democrats have really become. Some good news out of Tennessee today. A woman fired for refusing to get a COVID-19 vaccine mandated by her employer has just been awarded a settlement of nearly $700,000. Now, that could portend what will be a very expensive lesson for the authoritarian and totalitarian branch of the Marxist Dem Party. Tanya Benton was a biostatistical research scientist at Blue Cross Blue Shield. When her company mandated that she must have that vaccination, Tanya objected on religious grounds. However, her request for an exemption was denied, and she was let go, a decision that has cost the company nearly $1 million. And I say to you, Tanya, good for you and good for America. Well, before we go tonight, all of you out there know Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way they once did. They've been part of the cancel culture, so they want to pass on now savings directly to you. They're continuing the $25 extravaganza. Mike started MyPillow a while ago, and it was at that time just a one problem solution, one product company. Well, since then, with the help of his dedicated employees, Mike now has hundreds of products to offer you. Some of you may not have even heard about many of them. And to get the word out, they're having a huge $25 extravaganza. Beach towels, $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. Their 6-pack towel sets, $25. So 4-pack dish towels are, you guessed it, just $25. So now, for a limited time, you'll receive Mike's Movies free with any purchase. You will see these amazing offers at mypillow.com/Dobbs or call 800-977-9152 and use promo code Dobbs. It's promo code Dobbs. And please join us for my podcast, The Great America Show, each evening. Thank you for being with us this evening. And please join us here tomorrow. A reminder in our change in time, 8 Eastern and 7 Central. I'm getting used to it myself. I hope you will soon as well. Thanks so much. God bless you and good night.